All right, well, we are 1 minute after 7 o'clock, so we can go ahead and jump in. So again, thank you for joining us this evening. Assistant City Attorney Donegan, before we start with our presentation, are there any announcements from your end?
Yeah, sure. I just wanted to be clear for any of those who may be watching currently or hopefully in the future that the purpose of tonight's meeting is informational only. So no formal action will be taken. The council's not going to make any decisions or anything like that. And that's it for me, Jennifer. Thank you.
All right, thanks. And then before we dive into our presentation, we do want to make a note that this meeting is being recorded. So again, for folks who might be joining this evening or folks who are able to watch this later on, the recording will be posted on the city's district formation website, lomitacity.com/districting. So folks can go back and watch it again later, or for community members who couldn't make it here tonight, you can go to that webpage and watch the recording to learn more about the process. So next slide. My name is Jennifer Nentwig. I'm a principal with Trippepi Smith. I'm your facilitator here tonight and also part of the team assisting Lomita with outreach about this important issue. And here tonight, we also have City Manager Ryan Smoot and Assistant City Attorney Patrick Donegan from the city, who may chime in the event we get any city-specific questions during our Q&A portion. And here with us tonight, we also have Andrew Westall from Bayer Demographics and Research, and they're actually the demography firm working with the City of Lomita on this effort. So Andrew, would you like to say hi and share anything else about yourself?
Sure, thanks, Jennifer, and happy to be working with the City of Lomita on this project. We do demographics and districting and redistricting, so we look forward to working with members of the public as well as the city's team over the next several months. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Andrew. So we can move on to the next slide. We like to kick off all these workshops by starting with the community members in mind and thinking about what our goals are here tonight. So through the district formation process and events like tonight's workshops, one key part is to learn from the experts. And here tonight, that's Andrew from the demography side primarily. We know that this is a complex process. It doesn't happen very often. And so as a result, it really is an opportunity to learn about the process and why it's so important. So we'll learn from the experts. And then next, it's important for the experts to listen to you. We know that members of the community know the community best, and you are the experts on your neighborhoods and the communities of interest, which are so important in this district formation process. Next, we do want to make sure that you have an opportunity as community members to learn about the tools involved. So tonight we'll be going through a mapping tool demonstration where Andrew will actually pull up the tool to develop proposed maps and walk everyone through how to use that. And then last but not least, we want to make sure that everyone here tonight and everyone listening later on leaves empowered to give effective feedback. So by absorbing the content that we'll be going through during the workshop, by utilizing the resources that we'll be sharing, you can go through all of the information on the process, talk with your family members, talk with your neighbors, talk with your community members, and be informed to share input on this process that will shape the future of the city. And then next slide. And then next, we want to address the question, why should you care? So we know our goals of the workshop, and then really emphasizing why it matters to each community member. Fundamentally, we know that democracy just works better when community members are engaged. And for Lomita residents, that means being plugged in to your local government and weighing in on the important matters that factor into how your city is run. Second, there are things that you just know best about your communities. Like we mentioned, you are the ones who are going to have the most accurate and insightful information to share about your neighborhood. So we look forward to getting that input. And next, this really is at least a once in a decade opportunity, but for Lomita in this process, it's a once ever opportunity potentially, since this is the process of forming your districts. So it is not something that happens very often. And because of that, it's an exciting opportunity for the community to come together and work through this process together. And then next, before we turn it over for the demography piece, I'll just go over our brief schedule for this evening's workshop. So we will dig into the process, the legal criteria and goals. As I mentioned, then we will get in a demonstration on the mapping tool and how you can use it to build and submit your own proposed maps. Then we'll get into a really dynamic session on both a Q&A about anything we've covered so far, as well as gathering your inputs on neighborhoods and communities of interest. And then we'll wrap up with some next steps. So with that, I'll turn it over to Andrew for the next couple of slides.
Thanks, Jennifer. Welcome everybody once again. And what we're going to go through on these next set of slides is we're going to talk about really what are district-based elections and some of the criteria in developing what those districts look like and the process that we'll go through over the next several months. So the first question is, what are district-based elections? Well, in many jurisdictions throughout the United States have district-based elections. To give you some examples, all congressional districts are district-based elections. You also have state legislative districts for the state Senate and the state assembly, and even locally for the LA Unified School District Board of Education, which covers the city, those are also by district. And so the idea here is that under a district-based election system, the city of Lomita would be divided into equally populated election districts and equally populated districts. Currently, we have 5 city council members on the city council. And so the idea under district-based elections is that the city would be roughly equally populated among 5 different districts and be split into those 5 pieces. In order to get elected to that district, a candidate has to reside within the district and is only elected by voters residing within those districts. And so currently, if you're a resident of the city of Lomita, you could vote for any of the council members. And then under this new system that the city is looking at, you would only be able to vote for your current, your council member that represented your actual neighborhood. Next slide, please. So why are we considering the switch to district-based elections? Well, in January of this year, the city received a letter that challenged the current city's election system and asserting that the city's at-large election system violates the California Voting Rights Act. The California Voting Rights Act was a law that was put into place in 2002 to look at issues related to at-large election systems and to see if a city needs to transition to a district-based system. Based on the letter that the city received, and in light of that letter, the city of Lomita is taking steps to consider transitioning its at-large election process to district-based elections. And that's what we're doing here tonight to talk about during this workshop, and will be part of the city discussion over the next several months. Next slide, please. And so why does district formation matter to you as a resident of the city of Lomita? Well, first off, the way that you build districts is you group neighborhoods and communities together into a district for the purposes of electing a council member. And so as we go through this process, certain neighborhoods will be united, certain neighborhoods may be divided, depending on how we have to equalize the population between the 5 districts. And so as we go through this process, we'll actually decide what the boundaries are for these particular districts, and that the council will discuss and possibly consider approving. The mayor and the city council through this process are seeking your input to select a final district map for the city council. And you'll have a variety of ways to do that input in this process. This is just one of many steps and many hearings that the city will have on this process. And really what we are looking for out of you as a resident is providing opportunities to share with the mayor and the city council how you think these city council district boundaries should be drawn to best represent your community. Next slide, please. So what are the legal criteria for districting? In general, there is a variety of legal, both federal and state criteria that the city has to take into consideration while it's drawing a city council map for these districts. The first one is what's called the equal population principle. So the first idea is that all 5 of the council districts have to be roughly the same population. And what I mean by that is that they don't have to be exactly equal. Unlike other districts like congressional districts, which have to be within one person, the city does have some flexibility in terms of equalizing that population. And they use a mathematical formula called a 10% deviation. And so what that means is that a council district can be roughly 5% more than the ideal population or 5% less than the ideal population. But in general, you have to provide equal population among the districts. And like I said, you have some flexibility to meet the other criteria that I'll talk about here in a second. The next two areas of law really deal with the use of race and ethnicity in redistricting and in district formation. The first one is the U.S. Constitution's Equal Protection Clause. And the U.S. Constitution's Equal Protection Clause provides that while you can't use race as a predominant factor in this process, you can use race as a factor along with other traditional redistricting criteria. And when we get to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit more in depth of what that traditional redistricting criteria is. But in general, the U.S. Constitution's Equal Protection Clause, which comes from the 14th Amendment, protects all residents in this process. And once again, you can't use race as the predominant factor, but race can be used along with other factors that'll be considered, things like street boundaries, neighborhoods, and so forth. And like I said, we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. The next area of law that we also have to pay attention to when it comes to race and ethnicity is the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And the Voting Rights Act of 1965 prohibits the dilution of minority voting strength. And so in general, what the Voting Rights Act does is it provides for protection of minority groups so that when you have district-based elections, they aren't split into various areas or concentrated in areas to dilute their possibility of electing a maximum number of council members. And so there are two examples of this that we use in this process. The first one is called packing, right? And so we can't all of one ethnic group into one district if they can be a majority of more than one district. And you can't do what's called fracturing. And fracturing is the idea that you split them into a minority group into so many districts that they can't elect a representative of their choice. And so these are the two areas of law that we really look at, once again, with respect to race and ethnicity, and that help guide us through this process. And then lastly, we have the traditional redistricting criteria, which deal with things like contiguity, existing boundaries, communities of interest, and compactness. Next slide, please. So the traditional redistricting criteria or traditional districting criteria consists of a few different things. The first one is the idea of contiguity. And contiguity is the idea that if you have a district, that you should be able to go from one point in the district to any other point in the district without leaving the district. So the idea is that you don't have separate areas that represent one district. Certainly that may be hard in a place, say Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors, where you have islands off the coast, like Catalina Island. Obviously they aren't connected, but in most respects, like a City of Lomita, which is one contiguous area, that the districts have to be contiguous as well. The next area of traditional redistricting criteria is trying to utilize existing boundaries. And so while we go through this process, we use the U.S. Census Bureau's Geography to provide for the basis of the boundaries that we use. And we want to use boundaries that are geographic, street, and we can even use political boundaries if there are other jurisdictions that split the City of Lomita. So we certainly want to be able to use the major geographic boundaries of the city, the major streets of the city, to be able to draw new districts. Communities of interest is a very important criteria, and that's really where the public comes in terms of your participation and providing your input, because we want to be able to draw districts that preserve neighborhoods and communities of people that share common interests. And so even in a city like Lomita, you do have certain neighborhoods and certain geographic areas of the city. And as we go through this process, we want to understand from you how you view the City of Lomita. Where it is that you shop? Where is it that you worship, if you worship? Where, if you have children, where do your children go to school? So that we can understand from your viewpoint how you view the City of Lomita. And so we take all of that information into consideration, once again, as we draw these maps. And then the last one is the idea of compactness, that districts should be geographically compact. And compactness is probably the most subjective of these criteria, not necessarily a concern for the city of Lomita, once again, which is not a large jurisdiction, but compactness is something that we also want to take into consideration. Next slide, please. So once again, what types of public input are we seeking from the community? Well, as I mentioned before, we want to know what streets or boundaries or points of interest define your community. Once again, define your viewpoint of how you view where you live in the city of Lomita. Does your community have major geographic boundaries? Right? Do you have boundaries like Pacific Coast Highway? Is that a major boundary that affects your particular community? Is your community similar to other neighboring communities? Roughly, the city of Lomita is roughly a rectangle, but maybe your communities that you are similar to you are east-west and not north-south, right? Those are, once again, things that we'd like to understand from you. And then what are your shared interests with your neighbors and with your community members in your portion of the city of Lomita? What are those interests that you have in common? And once again, this is all the type of public input that we seek and help inform us to be able to draw maps for the mayor and council to consider. And we want to make sure we have good information to back up the justifications for those maps. Next slide, please. So as I keep saying, communities of interest are really the reason why we're here tonight and the reason why we hold public workshops and public hearings to get information from residents of the city so that we understand your communities of interest. Once again, preserving communities, we're trying to preserve communities that share common interests and should be included in a single district in order to have effective and fair representation. And there are a variety of things that may define or determine your communities of interest. Right, housing patterns could be one. Points of interest, as I mentioned before, where you shop, or where you worship if you worship, or where your children go to school if you have children. Things like public services. Are there certain public services in your section of town that are different from other parts of the city? Are there common cultural or language characteristics that define your neighborhood in the city of Lomita that aren't necessarily prevalent in other parts of the city? And so once again, this is all the types of information that we're trying to collect from the public in order to help inform the mayor and city council's decision making. Next slide, please. And so how can you provide public input? Well, there are a variety of ways, and it really starts with the city's website. And so you can attend a public hearing or workshop like you are doing this evening. And this workshop is being recorded and will be posted online so that you can watch it at a later date. And you would find that at lomitacity.com/districting. You could also submit a public comment form, and there's a public comment form on the city's districting website. Once again, at lomitacity.com/districting, which will really help you to guide you to answer those questions which are related to communities of interest. And then lastly, you can, and we'll go into this in just a minute as well, you can submit your own council district map draft. And we'll have a mapping tool demonstration this evening that'll walk you through how to use that tool and how to submit that map to the city. Once again, you can submit that directly to drawlomita@lomitacity.com. And that's the email address for this process. And as I'll show you in the mapping tool demonstration, there's an easy way to submit that map to the city as well. So that's the various ways that you can provide public input. Later during this workshop, we'll talk about upcoming dates and upcoming timelines in terms of the city's process. But we want to make sure that you participate. And once again, the easiest way to find information on this process is to go to lomitacity.com/districting. And so with that, Jennifer, I'll turn it back over to you for the next part of our workshop.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. And speaking of participation, now is a point in the workshop where we like to pause. And we know a lot of information has just been shared about the process, about the reasons why this is being considered. So we have at least a few folks dialed in this evening, and we'd like to see if there are any questions for anyone on what's been covered so far. So if you are interested in asking a question, please go ahead and raise your hand. Okay, well, I'm not seeing any questions pop through via Zoom. So again, for folks who are viewing this workshop maybe later, you're welcome to engage via the website, via the email address and other tools that we'll be sharing as we move on with the slides. So we will move on to the next slide now, which is another opportunity to get input, but specifically on communities of interest. So at this point, we like to go over all these questions here on the slide. We'll ask who is part of your community, what are some meaningful places your community recognizes or gathers at, what are some common concerns you share with a group, what are some common cultural characteristics that unite a community, what are common work-related traits that bring a community together, what is significant about the physical environment, and what areas benefit from staying together in a district. And these are all questions that would factor into those communities of interest that Andrew described in the slides we just went over. So if we do have anyone who's interested in sharing that type of feedback with us this evening, I can open it back up for any raised hands. And I am not seeing any raised hands. So we can move on and hopefully get some additional feedback from folks who watch this recording at a later date. So I believe with that, we can move on to the mapping tool demonstration. And Andrew, I'll turn it back over to you.
Great, thanks, Jennifer. And I'll screen share my website browser here. Okay. So tonight what we're going to do is we're going to do a mapping tool demonstration. And the first thing I want to do is to show you on the website where you can find the mapping tool. And so this is the website we were just talking about at lomitacity.com/districting. And as you can see, there's a variety of information here that Jennifer will go through after the mapping tool demonstration. But the first one to go through here in terms of drawing an actual map is going to this draw a map link, right? And so if you come down here on the right side of the screen and you go to the draw a map link and you click on that, that will take you to another page and it will tell you information on how to draw a map. On this page, we have the online mapping tool district builder, and we'll go to that in just a second. There's also a getting started guide here, which can help you outside of this workshop with other questions or information you may need. And certainly you can contact us at drawlomita@lomitacity.com if you have any particular questions about the mapping tool that you need help with. And as I talked about before, you can submit your maps electronically by email through the drawlomita@lomitacity.com. You can mail them to the city clerk's office, and you can also do it in person at City Hall. And so there are a variety of ways you can submit these maps, but really what we want to show you tonight is how to actually draw a map. And so the first thing that you would do is go to this district builder link right here, and you would click on that. And that will take you to the district builder website. And so up here, you have information that talks about joining an organization, logging in, and registering. And so what you want to do, first thing you want to do is you want to register, right? And so if you come up here and you hit the register button, it's very easy to set up an account. They just need your name, email, and a password. And with that, then you'll go back to that previous page that I just showed you. And so this is the organization page, once again, for the City of Lomita, and this is where we would start. And so I've already registered. And so once you've registered, you go into the login page, right? And you can, once again, put in your email and put in your password, and then you would log in. And if you go over here where it says My Organization, I have a variety of other cities that we've worked with, but I just go to the City of Lomita, and it will take you once again back to this page. Down here, there's a brief description here, which is similar to the website about the process. And you can always use this link up above here to go back to the city's redistricting or districting website. And as you can see, we have 4 individuals that are currently working on drawing maps. Down here at the bottom is the template, and this is where we're going to start. And which the next step that we'll go through is using this template. But I also wanted to show you down here at the bottom, we'll also feature maps that are submitted by members of the public. We already have one map that's been submitted by Gloria Gutierrez for this process. And so you can always view her map as well. But let's show you how to actually draw a map. And so once again, you want to go to the template here, and you just want to click on use this template. So with that, you can go through each of these block groups and kind of see what's there, and I'll show you how to select on them for an actual map. You can also go to Census Blocks, which is a smaller level of geography, as you can see with the extra lines that are there. And you can use your mouse wheel to scroll in and out to look at closer of what the city of Lomita it looks like in that particular area. Right. So in this particular block, we are on Narboni between 255th and 250th and 254th Street. Right. And so you can see all the geography that comes up there. But in terms of selecting maps and drawing maps, your 2 levels of geography, once again, are census blocks, which are much smaller. Well, actually, let me go to the left-hand side of the page here. So as you're drawing districts, because there are 5 city council members in the city of Lomita who are elected at large, we will be drawing district maps with 5 council districts. 196 people. And based on the census data once again. And so this is where we'll go through and actually draw districts, right? But I wanted to show you this as well. And then up here, you have tools that you can use. And so you have a point and click, and I'll just show you this without drawing too much, but you can just select a census block and select another census block and select another one. And you can do selections that way. And by hitting accept, you would create that as part of District 1 here. You may have noticed here on the left-hand side of the page, as we selected those census blocks, the population in District 1 increased to 588 people, but we're still 600 people short, right? And so that's one way that you can select census blocks or block groups. Another way is you can do it by selecting an area. And so you can draw a rectangle, right? And they'll select different areas like this. And basically what you do is you hold your mouse click down in a certain area and then just drag it and it will pick up various areas of the city. As you can see just in that area right there, once again in District 1, that's 2,357 people. So we're still short 1,839 people for that particular district. But that's another way that you can select them. And then the last way that you have up here is a paintbrush selection, where you can actually just go through and hold your mouse click down again, and you can just paint over the area of the city that you want to go through. And so those are the 3 different ways in which you can draw, 3 different tools that you can use to draw maps. The other things that you have here on the screen, labels, you can pull up various labels. And as you can see, here we have a variety of different information that you can use, that you can put on top of each of the census blocks. So you have the census population by ethnicity, you have the voting age population by ethnicity, the citizen voting age population by ethnicity. We also include income data, and so you can look at household incomes. You can look at educational attainment here. You can look at whether you have owners or renters in a particular area. As well as a language spoken at home, whether it's English, Spanish, an API language, or a different language. You also have poverty, and then some employment data here as well. But the most basic one that we would use, if you wanted to use a label, would be population. And it'll show you the population of each of the census blocks that we're dealing with. And so it help you inform, when you're looking for a certain number, when you're drawing a district, you're looking for a certain census block, it'll kind of help you guide which direction you want to go in. And so labels can be very helpful as well. And like I said, you have a variety of different data here above and beyond what the Census Bureau provides that'll help inform that data. The other data that we use besides the Census Bureau is comes from what's called the American Community Survey. The American Community Survey is another data set that's put out by the U.S. Census Bureau, but that's where we get all of that citizen voting age population data, educational attainment, and other non-ethnic data that we use during this process. Up here, you have another tool which is called Evaluate, and I'll use this at the end as well, but I'll just show it to you quickly. On the evaluation tool, as we went through the different criteria that we talked about, what this evaluation tool will do is it will go through and look at that criteria for you. And so it will let you know if you've met that criteria. Now, competitiveness is something that we don't use in this process. In the state of California, we're not allowed to use partisan data as we develop districts at the local level. And so that's something that's not available to you, but it will tell you if you met the equal population criteria between the various districts, the contiguity criteria we talked about earlier in terms of making sure that you can travel from one point of a district to any other point in the district without leaving the district. It'll have a score on compactness, which once again, compactness can be very subjective depending on the geography of the city and the way census blocks are built, but it's always something you want to take a look at. You can look at whether or not you have majority minority districts, right? And whether you have any Voting Rights Act issues, Federal Voting Rights Act issues or equal protection issues. And then something that's probably not as important for the city of Lomita, because it's likely we'll build most of this maps based on census blocks, but it also tell you if you split block groups throughout the process, which certainly I think in the city of Lomita, that's highly likely. And so these are the different evaluation criteria that you can use, once you've drawn a map to see that you've met all the criteria that the city is required to follow throughout this process, so that you know that when you submit a map to the city, that it is a viable map that the mayor and council can consider and meets all of that legal criteria. The last part I'll show you here is you have two other buttons here. There's an export button and a submit button. If you select the submit button, as you can see here, it will come up with this screen first and really tell you a little bit about what will happen. But basically, one way that you can submit your map directly to the city is that once you've completed it, right, you don't want to hit this button until you've completed your map, because it'll lock you in from making any changes. And the only way that you could revise the map after submitting it is copying the map and making edits. And so in general, this is the way that you would submit the map, like Mr. Gutierrez had done earlier, and that allows us to submit that information to the city. As of now, we plan on, we ask that members of the public submit any maps that they want to submit to the city council for consideration by January 3rd, 2023. So over the course of the next 3 months, so that they can be considered at the first part of this process. The export button is something that you probably won't use, but you could if you're a little more GIS savvy. This will allow you to export it into various GIS formats, which we can also, you can email that to the city clerk, and that is something that we can also process for the mayor and city council and make sure that they consider those maps as well. But certainly the submit button is probably the easiest way to do that today. And so with that, what I'd like to do is just go through an exercise of drawing 5 council districts and showing you what it looks like, how easy it is, so that you can do that on your own time and consider submitting a map to the city. So once again, we have our 5 council districts over here. If you want to switch council districts, it's very easy to do. I don't know how easy it is to see the shaded bar on Council District 1 on your computer, but you can just click to the next district and it will take you to District 2, District 3, District 4, and District 5. And so the key as you're drawing districts is you want to make sure once you've completed one that you can move on to the next district. So with that, we'll start with Council District 1. And I think I'll start with a paintbrush. And as you can see here, once again, we have our census blocks. If you want to go to block groups, it would look like this. And you go to census blocks to help refine your map. But why don't we start with block groups? And then as we get closer to equalized population, we can refine them a little better. So our first district, why don't we look at taking everything north of Lomita Boulevard and see if that's enough population for us to create a district. So we'll take this census block group here, and we'll take this one right here. And as you can see over here, that gives us 3,429 people in that district, but we're still short 767. As you'll see here, this arrow will turn into a green check when you're at the right amount of population. And as I said before, there is that flexibility, that 10% deviation of flexibility that you have there. And so it'll take that into consideration, right? And it talks about a 5% population deviation tolerance here, but that's 5% above and 5% below for the most part. So if we wanted to start here with, once again, Council District 1, we'd hit the accept button. And there's our first district, but once again, we don't have enough population. And as we look at these other block groups down here, let's try to select that one. Yeah, that will give us a district right there. As you can see here, we have 4,316 people in that district. It's over by 120 people, but it's within that equalized population deviation tolerance. And so that can be our first district that we'll accept. All right, so we'll add that to Council District 1, and there's a Council District 1. Once again, I do want to remind the public that this is just a mapping tool demonstration and an exercise. I don't know what the actual council districts will look like when the draft maps are submitted to the council, but this just gives you, once again, a idea of how to do this on your own, so that you can play around and take your time and submit a map to the city. And so that's our first district, once again, in this demonstration. If we'll go to Council District 2, go to the next one here, and we'll take a look at that. And we'll start, once again, and as I said before, to toggle between the districts, there's a kind of a shaded bar. And so you want to just click on Council District 2, and that'll take us to the next district. And so with that, we'll look at, let's try this one here. And that doesn't give us quite enough people, right? That's 2,382 people that live in this block group here on the east side of town, or the west side of town, excuse me. And so that doesn't give us quite enough people. So we can look at something like maybe taking this area, and that still doesn't give us enough people, right? We're still 275 people short in terms of our deviation tolerance. And so maybe that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Maybe we go back over to this area. Now this has less people over here in this particular block group. So that's why we're underpopulated by 442 people. But we can start here. And then, as I talked about before, you can always start with your block groups and then move to the smaller geography of the blocks to get to that equalized population. So why don't we start here with Council District 2. That gives us a nice looking start to Council District 2. And then what we'd want to do is switch once again from block groups to blocks, gives us a smaller area of geography. And now we're looking for roughly 442 people. So looks like a good place to start might be here, 384 people. We got our green check mark over here, as we talked about. It's within our equalized population tolerance. This district has 4,138 people in it with deviation of minus 58 people. And so with that, that's a good place to finish our District 2. And once again, you hit the accept button, and that'll give you your Council District 2. Next up, we have Council District 3. And so once again, you want to click on Council District 3 so that you can aren't adding or continuing to add to Council District 2, you can go back to the block groups if you'd like, or you can go back to blocks. And let's start here and kind of see where we go. Actually, why don't we start here? And so with Council District 3, we've got, let's try this area and this area, but it's taking away part of our Council District 2. So why don't we just start there for Council District 3, and we'll accept that. And then we'll come down here. And as I said before, you toggle back and forth between block groups and blocks. We can go in and select the blocks here in this block group that wasn't part of Council District 2. You can always lock the District 2. And so, if you get in a situation where you keep adding back and forth between districts and losing your equality of population, you can always lock the district or unlock the district to be able to change it or not change it if you like what you're looking at. And so that's another option that you have. But as I said, we can come through here and just select the various blocks. And as you can see, as I add these blocks, it adds more population to Council District 3. Right now that we have 3,548 people with a deviation of -648. So we don't have enough population yet. So we just keep adding and adding. And then let's see, this might probably get us there. There we go. So all of this gray area, once again, we're going to add to Council District 3. And as you can see here, this district has a population of 3,993. It's -203 in terms of its deviation, which is within our tolerance, right? And so you have your green check mark, and so that's acceptable. So accept that, and that gives us Council District 3 to work with. Next up, let's try Council District 4. In Council District 4, we can come back and pick up these census blocks that we didn't add to Council District 3. And let's see where we're at. So that gives us about 1,000 people there, 1,077. We still have 3,000 people that we have to pick up. So let's go ahead and add that. And so 3,000 people, that's a lot of people. Let's see here. Well, we certainly might need to do some shuffling around just based on the geography of the city, but why don't we go ahead and start and see how far we can get here. So with that, why don't we come, let's see. Actually, yeah, why don't we come south, see how far south we can go here. And so once again, we're adding to Council District 4 here. All right. So this is a Council District 4. That meets our population equality here. So we're at 4,514 people, and we're overpopulated by 318, which might be a little high. I wonder if we took this off there. Oh, that's a little closer. So we took this one census block out here, and we're at 4,282 individuals, once again with the deviation of +86. And so this is a Council District 4 for us. And so we can go ahead and accept that. Once again, it meets our population deviation. Certainly, we may have some concerns about the compactness of that district. And throughout this process, we're just showing you how to draw a map. So we aren't doing any major evaluation on ethnic groups during this demonstration today. And so that's something else that the city would have to take into consideration depending on the configuration of a map. But at least in terms of population equality, right, we've got 4 good districts and we have 1 left to go. So let's go on to District 5 here. And we'll just try to pick up the rest of these areas that we have. All right. So one thing I'd like to point out is, as you can see here, once we've selected all of the rest of the area in the city for Council District 5, we have a couple of things going on. The first one is that up here, where the population is 0, the deviation is 0, and it's green check mark, that's always good to make sure that when you end your process of drawing your maps, that you have a 0, 0, and a check mark here, which means that all of the census blocks, all of the census geography of the city has been assigned to a council district, right? If you have a number here or not a green check mark here, then one of these smaller census blocks, and you can see there are some small ones here, on the edge of the city where there is no people that living, but you want to make sure that you add these into your district so that once again, you're meeting all of the legal criteria. But by selecting the rest of this area here, we have 4,253 individuals, has a deviation of plus 57. So we got our green check mark here, and we got green check marks all the way across. So we can accept that. And what we have in front of you here now is an example of what 5 council districts might look like in the city of Lomita. Once again, there are a variety of other factors to check other than just equalizing population. And so you can go to this evaluate button once again at the top right corner and click on that. And it'll tell you, so first off, we met our equal population criteria, right? We got a 5 out of 5. We've met our contiguity criteria. So we also have a 5 out of 5. And so remember, once again, contiguity is the idea that you should be able to travel from one part of the district to any other part of the district without leaving the district, right? So we want to make sure that if we have Council District 2 over here on the west side of the city, that it doesn't include some census blocks over on the east side of the city. They all have to connect in some fashion. As I mentioned before, the competitiveness criteria is not something that we use in the state of California. Compactness and compactness is something, once again, that we'd have to consider, particularly with this Council District 4, and see if that made the most sense in terms of the geography of the city. But compactness is something you want to consider. Oops, excuse me. You also have your majority minority districts, right? So you can click on that, and it'll show you, that each one of these districts is a minority coalition district. And what that means is that as you look at the demographics here, that there isn't any one, like Council District 5 here, for instance, which is highlighted. There isn't any particular ethnic group that is a majority in that district, but it is not majority white either, right? And so that's why it's called a minority coalition district. And in fact, all 5 of these districts have the same thing. So you look at Council District 4, the white population and Latino population are exactly the same. Council District 3, which is in there in the middle of the city, you have slightly larger Latino population than white population in that district, but you certainly have a very large Asian population in all of these districts. Once again, if you get to Council District 2 here, once again, another majority minority district, and then of course, Council District 1. So these are all things that the city will have to take into consideration as it considers the districts and the breakdown of the ethnic data for each of these districts. But once again, this evaluate tool is very helpful in terms of showing you the different areas, the different things that you want to consider in terms of the legal criteria. And what it also does is it helps you inform how you draw your maps, and so that as you're submitting maps to the city that meet the criteria, and so it's something that the council can actually consider. It's very often we get maps during a process like this which don't meet the legal criteria, and so the council really can't even consider them because they have certain legal obligations that they have to meet in terms of adopting districts. So once you're done with your map, once again, you can export it into a GIS format if you're more GIS savvy, or you can just hit the submit button, right? And so you can select on the submit button, and once again, you just hit submit here on the bottom. right? And it'll tell you what your next step could be, which, as I said, you can export it. You can submit written testimony about your community in the districting process, and you can send a specific map directly to the city. Once you've hit the submit button, that comes directly to the city. And then what we will do as the demographers for the city is we will process it and make sure that they have full consideration of all the maps that are submitted by members of the public as they go through their process in 2023. So with that, Jennifer, I believe I'm done. I'm happy to stop the screen share and see if there's any questions from the public. And then we can go on to the next part of the presentation.
Sure. And I guess I did want to start with a follow-up on that. So just to make sure I'm hearing you correctly, if people click submit through that web page, then they do not need to send an email with their map also. It'll go directly through the system.
Correct. Yes,
Okay.
this is a nice new feature that they just added in the last month. And so it makes it certainly easier for the user and for the city.
Awesome. That'll be great. Okay, well, we do have a couple of attendees who might have questions about that mapping demonstration. So I'll go ahead and open it up. If anyone has any questions about the mapping tools, let's go ahead and ask folks to raise hands. And while we're waiting for those hands to raise, I do have one other question that sometimes is asked among communities where we've worked. If a community member wants to draw a map but only feels strongly about maybe one district or any number other than all 5, is that okay?
Oh, absolutely, Jennifer. That's a great question. So using the mapping tool, you can draw all 5 districts. You could draw just one district and submit that to the city. Or if you just wanted to draw your neighborhood to show the city what you feel your neighborhood boundaries are and submit written testimony with that, you can do that as well. And so any maps that you want to submit, we'll certainly look at and make sure that the council and the mayor are able to consider it. And as I said before, the key is really just, outside of the neighborhood map to make sure that you're meeting the legal criteria. Even with one district, you want to make sure that population is equalized so that the council can consider it.
Okay, thank you. And then I'll turn it over one more time to our attendees, see if anyone is feeling talkative. If not, then you did an awesome job explaining the tool and there are no questions. So I'm still not seeing any raised hands. So we'll take that as understanding of the tool. So great job. We can go on to the next slide describing the website, and we'll go ahead and walk through some of those resources online. Awesome. So on this page, we have a screenshot of the webpage that we've been describing so much throughout this presentation. Again, that URL is lomitacity.com/districting. And we really encourage all of the community members to hop on that page and look around. It's full of resources that will get everyone up to speed on the process and provide lots of opportunities to participate. So here on the slide, you can see the main page that you'll reach when you go to that URL. And here you can see the background. So it answers some of the questions that have come up in this presentation about what the process is all about, why the city is embarking upon it, and what the eventual outcomes could be. So you'll find that background information there on the main page. And then as you poke around, you can see on those side menu options, the different elements that you'll find. So one important piece is the calendar of districting public hearings and workshops. So there you'll find not only the dates of all of the meetings throughout the process, but all the materials as well. So you'll find hearing notices in multiple languages, including English and Spanish. You'll find flyers, you'll find the agenda for hearings, as well as staff reports, presentations for both hearings and workshops, as well as recordings. So if anyone misses a hearing or a workshop for any reason, this is an awesome resource. You can hop on and watch the recordings whenever you have the time. And as we mentioned earlier, some of the future dates in the process will continue to be updated here on this calendar. So it's an important one to check out moving forward. And then next in our menu option here, I'm sorry, we can go back to the previous slide. On the web page, you have the opportunity to draw a map that takes you to the page that Andrew described a few minutes ago. We'll also have a page for proposed maps. And this is a page where all submitted maps that are compliant with the criteria Andrew described will be posted. And so that'll be a wonderful place for folks to go and take a look. Full transparency, everything will be there for review. And you can take a look and see if there are maps that you like and may want to provide feedback on to say, I've checked out this map and I really like it. We also have all frequently asked questions about the process on our districting FAQs page. So again, that's a great place to go in and see a lot of the information that we have covered in this presentation here as well. And just a final few tabs on the page, we have districting resources, including news releases and other materials being pushed out throughout the process. And then that last link that you can click on the page is a contact page. So if you forget the email address for any reason or need a different way to contact the city, there's a form directly on that page where you can go ahead and submit comments. There's also a link to the email address and a city phone number that we'll be sharing here in an upcoming slide as well. So hopefully that makes you interested in the districting webpage and you can go online and check that out. So next we can move on to the next slide. And just to reiterate the upcoming deadlines that are so important. So as Andrew mentioned as well, the nearest deadline coming up is actually going to be January 3rd. And that's the deadline to submit maps for consideration at the third hearing. This gives community members several months between now and then to use all the information shared here tonight, get comfortable with that mapping tool that Andrew demonstrated, and work on developing and sharing your own proposed maps. Then after that, on January 10th of 2023, all those proposed maps that meet the criteria will be posted to that webpage that we just described. And then future meeting dates moving forward in the process will be posted to that districting calendar webpage. And we can move on to the next slide. As we wrap up tonight, I do want to emphasize how community members can continue to stay engaged in the process. You can visit that website, lomitacity.com/districting, to find additional information, the mapping tools, materials related to all the meetings, and the draft maps when they become available and more. So that will continue to be a great resource. You can email us at any time by emailing drawlomita@lomitacity.com, or you can call the city at that number there on the slide, 310-325-7110. And with that, on behalf of the City of Lomita, I want to thank everyone for joining this evening and for watching this workshop after the fact to learn about this process and how you can participate. And we hope to see you again at additional districting events as the process moves forward. So thanks again and enjoy the rest of your evening.